The Pacific Vascular Institute gleamed like a temple to modern medicine. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the pristine white corridors in California sunshine, while original Monet paintings adorned walls that had witnessed some of the most complex cardiac surgeries on the West Coast. This wasn't just a hospital, it was a shrine to medical excellence, where Hollywood executives and tech billionaires came to have their hearts literally rebuilt by the most celebrated surgeon in Los Angeles. Dr. Marcus Lang stood in the center of Operating Room 3, his hands moving with the precision of a master artist. At 48, he possessed the kind of rugged handsomeness that made patients trust him instantly. Salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, steel blue eyes that radiated confidence, and surgeons' hands that seemed blessed by divine intervention. "Suction," Dr. Lang commanded quietly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who cheated death thousands of times. "We're going to rebuild this aortic arch from scratch. Mrs. Rodriguez's husband is going to dance at his daughter's wedding because of what we do here today." The surgical team moved around him like a choreographed ballet. Nurses anticipated his every need. Anesthesiologists monitored vitals with religious devotion. Everyone in OR3 knew they were witnessing greatness in action. "Dr. Lang," whispered his surgical assistant, Dr. Sarah Chen, "your technique is incredible. I've never seen anyone reconstruct damaged vessels with such precision." Lang smiled beneath his surgical mask. 20 years of practice, Dr. Chen, and an absolute commitment to giving every patient a miracle. What Dr. Chen didn't know was that she was witnessing the performance of a lifetime by a man who'd turned medical miracles into the most sophisticated insurance fraud scheme in American history. 4 hours later, Roberto Rodriguez emerged from surgery with a completely reconstructed cardiovascular system and a prognosis that bordered on miraculous. His wife, Maria, wept with relief as Dr. Lang explained the procedure in his warm, reassuring voice. "The damage to Roberto's heart was extensive," Lang said, still wearing his surgical scrubs like badges of honor. "We performed a complete aortic reconstruction with synthetic grafts, rebuilt 3 major arteries, and installed a specialized valve system that should give him 30 more years of healthy life." "Doctor," Maria sobbed, "you saved my husband. How can we ever thank you?" "Your husband's recovery is all the thanks I need," Lang replied with the modest smile that had made him a celebrity in Los Angeles medical circles. "Just promise me you'll dance at your daughter's wedding." As the Rodriguez family embraced their miracle, Dr. Marcus Lang was already calculating how many times he could bill insurance companies for Roberto's single surgery, under different patient names, using recycled medical records, through shell clinics that existed only on paper. Because Roberto Rodriguez wasn't just receiving a life-saving operation. He was unknowingly starring in a $27 million insurance fraud that would ultimately destroy the man who'd saved his life. 20 years earlier, Johns Hopkins Medical School. "Marcus, you have a gift," said Dr. Elizabeth Harper, head of cardiovascular surgery at Johns Hopkins, reviewing the young medical students' test scores for the 3rd time. "I've been teaching for 30 years and I've never seen surgical aptitude like this." 28-year-old Marcus Lang looked up from the cadaver he'd been practicing on, his hands steady despite having performed the same vascular reconstruction 12 times that day. "Thank you, Dr. Harper. I just want to be the best surgeon I can be." "Where does this drive come from?" Marcus paused, his hands still holding the delicate instruments. "My parents immigrated from Romania with nothing. My father worked 3 jobs to pay for my education. Every surgery I perform is for him, for the sacrifices he made." Dr. Harper nodded approvingly. She'd seen plenty of privileged medical students who treated surgery like a hobby. Marcus Lang was different, hungrier, more focused, driven by the kind of desperation that could either create greatness or destroy everything in its path. "I'm recommending you for our accelerated residency program," she announced. 5 years instead of 7, with rotations at the country's top cardiac surgery departments. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. The accelerated program was reserved for maybe 2 students per year, the ones destined to become department heads at major hospitals. "Dr. Harper, I won't let you down." "I know you won't, Marcus. Just remember, with great talent comes great responsibility. Patients will trust you with their lives. Insurance companies will pay you enormous sums. The medical community will look to you for leadership. Don't let that power corrupt you." Marcus nodded solemnly. but his mind was already racing with possibilities. Great talent, great responsibility, and great money. He had no idea the doctor. Harper's warning would prove prophetic in the worst possible way. 5 years later, downtown General Hospital, Detroit doctor. "Lang, we need you in trauma," called Nurse Patricia Williams, her voice cutting through the chaos of the understaffed emergency room. "Multiple vehicle accident, 2 patients with massive cardiac trauma." Marcus sprinted down the hallway, his surgical scrubs already stained with blood from the previous 3 emergency surgeries. Downtown General was nothing like the pristine teaching hospitals where he'd trained. It was underfunded, understaffed, and served the poorest populations in Michigan. But it was also where Marcus Lang learned that he could work miracles. "What do we have?" he asked, scrubbing in for surgery. 23-year-old male, steering column through the chest, aortic laceration, maybe 10 minutes before he bleeds out, reported Dr. James Mitchell, the trauma coordinator. Second patient is a teenager, collapsed lung, cardiac contusion, stable for now. "Get me OR2 for the aortic case, OR4 for the teenager. I'll take both simultaneously." Dr. Mitchell stared at him. "Marcus, that's impossible. You can't perform 2 cardiac surgeries at the same time." "Watch me." For the next 6 hours, Marcus Lang performed surgery that the medical community still discusses in hushed, reverent tones. He reconstructed a completely severed aorta, while simultaneously directing a second team through delicate cardiac repair surgery. Both patients not only survived, they recovered completely. "How did you do that?" Dr. Mitchell asked as they finished the final sutures. Marcus was exhausted but exhilarated. "I saw the procedures in my mind before I made the first incision. Every cut, every suture, every contingency. It's like conducting an orchestra. Marcus, you just saved 2 people who should have died. The insurance reimbursement for tonight's surgeries will probably cover our department's budget for the next 2 months." That's when Marcus Lang first understood the connection between medical miracles and financial rewards. Insurance companies paid enormous sums for complex cardiac surgeries. The more complex the procedure, the higher the payout. And nobody performed more complex procedures than Dr. Marcus Lang. "Dr. Mitchell," Marcus said quietly, "what would happen if someone billed insurance for procedures that were slightly more complex than what was actually performed?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if tonight's aortic reconstruction was billed as a complete cardiac transplant preparation? Technically, we did transplant-level work." Dr. Mitchell's expression grew serious. "Marcus, that would be insurance fraud. Billing for procedures you didn't perform is a federal crime." "But what if you did perform them? What if you performed procedures that were so complex, so innovative, that the standard billing codes couldn't adequately describe the work? Then you document everything thoroughly and bill for the closest equivalent procedure." Marcus nodded, but his mind was already working through more creative possibilities. Standard billing codes, closest equivalent procedures, thorough documentation, all of which could be interpreted creatively by someone with enough surgical knowledge and creativity. "Dr. Mitchell, I think I'm ready to start my own practice." Pacific Vascular Institute, Beverly Hills. 3 years later. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for Pacific Vascular Institute was attended by Los Angeles' medical elite, city council members, and several celebrity patients who'd already experienced Dr. Lang's miraculous surgical techniques. The boutique clinic occupied an entire floor of a gleaming medical building with state-of-the-art equipment that rivaled major university hospitals. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Lang addressed the gathered crowd, wearing a perfectly tailored Armani suit that complemented his surgical reputation. "Pacific Vascular Institute represents a new paradigm in cardiovascular care. We're not just treating disease, we're engineering biological perfection." Enthusiastic applause filled the marble-appointed lobby. Dr. Lang had become more than a surgeon. He was a medical celebrity whose patient testimonials read like religious testimonies. "Dr. Lang saved my life," said Amanda Foster, a prominent entertainment attorney whose cardiac surgery had been featured in Los Angeles Magazine. "I was told by 3 other surgeons that my condition was inoperable. Dr. Lang not only saved me, he gave me a heart that works better than when I was 20 years old." What Amanda Foster didn't know was that her inoperable condition had been billed to insurance companies as 4 separate procedures, performed at 3 different clinics under 2 different patient names. Because Dr. Marcus Lang had discovered something fascinating about medical insurance billing, the system was built on trust. Jennifer, Dr. Lang said to his new practice manager, Jennifer Walsh, as the ribbon-cutting ceremony concluded, "I need you to research something for me." "Of course, doctor. What would you like me to look into?" "Billing codes for rare vascular reconstruction procedures. Specifically, how insurance companies verify that complex procedures were actually performed." Jennifer, a former hospital administrator with 15 years of experience, looked puzzled. "Dr. Lang, are you concerned about billing accuracy? Because I can assure you that our coding department is extremely thorough." "I'm not concerned about accuracy," Marcus said with his trademark confident smile. "I'm concerned about maximizing reimbursement for the innovative procedures we perform here. Patients like Amanda Foster receive surgical techniques that go far beyond standard reconstruction methods. I want to make sure we're being fairly compensated." "I understand. What specifically should I research?" Marcus handed her a list he'd been compiling for months. "These are billing codes for the most expensive vascular procedures covered by private insurance. I want to understand the documentation requirements, the verification processes, and the appeals procedures for denied claims." Jennifer scanned the list. Every code represented procedures that cost between $75,000 and $150,000. "These are all extremely rare surgeries, Dr. Lang. Some of these procedures are only performed a few times per year in the entire country." "Exactly. And I believe we'll be performing them more frequently than any other clinic in California." Jennifer Walsh had no idea that she'd just been recruited as an unwitting accomplice in the most sophisticated medical fraud scheme in American history. Over the next 6 months, Jennifer compiled detailed research on insurance billing procedures, while Dr. Lang quietly laid the groundwork for his operation. He studied medical records databases, researched patient identification systems, and developed relationships with struggling private clinics that might be willing to process paperwork for financial consideration. "Dr. Lang," Jennifer reported during one of their regular meetings, "I've completed the research you requested. The documentation requirements for rare vascular procedures are surprisingly minimal." "How minimal?" "Preoperative scans, surgical notes, post-operative reports, and patient consent forms. As long as the documentation appears legitimate, insurance companies rarely question the validity of procedures performed by board-certified surgeons with established reputations." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "What about verification? Do they send investigators to confirm that surgeries actually took place?" "Only in cases where fraud is suspected. For routine claims, even expensive ones, the system is largely automated. As long as the paperwork is complete and the billing codes match the documentation, payments are processed without human review." "And what triggers fraud investigations?" Jennifer consulted her notes. "Unusual patterns in billing frequency, procedures that seem inconsistent with patient demographics, or tips from whistleblowers. But for established surgeons with good reputations, the threshold for investigation is very high." Marcus smiled. "Excellent work, Jennifer. This information will help us ensure that our patients receive the maximum benefit from their insurance coverage." What Jennifer didn't realize was that Dr. Marcus Lang was about to transform her research into a blueprint for stealing $27 million. The ghost patients. 2 months later, Dr. Lang's private office. 11:30 p.m. Dr. Lang sat alone in his office, surrounded by computer screens displaying patient records, insurance databases, and financial projections that would have terrified anyone who understood their implications. On his primary monitor was a file labeled Project Phoenix, a carefully organized system for creating fake patients, processing false insurance claims, and laundering the proceeds through legitimate medical businesses. The genius of Lang's scheme was its foundation in reality. He would perform genuine surgeries, complex, life-saving procedures that fully justified his reputation as a miracle worker. But each real surgery would generate multiple fake insurance claims using recycled patient information and fabricated medical records. His phone buzzed with a text from David Chen, a former medical student who dropped out due to financial problems and was now working as a medical coding specialist. "Dr. Lang, I found someone who might be interested in our consulting project. Alex Rodriguez worked in medical records at Cedars-Sinai for 8 years before being laid off. He's desperate for work and asking minimal questions. Marcus typed back, "Set up a meeting. Private location. Emphasize the legitimate nature of our medical consulting business." The consulting business was Dr. Lang's cover story for recruiting accomplices. He was establishing a network of unemployed medical professionals who would process paperwork for what they believed was a legitimate billing optimization service. 3 days later, Marcus met Alex Rodriguez at a coffee shop in Santa Monica, far from his Beverly Hills medical practice. "Dr. Lang," Alex said, extending his hand nervously, "David said you might have work for someone with my background. Alex, I appreciate you meeting with me on short notice." Marcus radiated the same confident charm that made patients trust him with their lives. "I run a specialized consulting service that helps private practices maximize their insurance reimbursements. We work with several boutique clinics that perform rare, high-value procedures. What kind of work would I be doing? Medical records management, insurance form preparation, billing code optimization. Essentially, we take complex surgical procedures and ensure they're properly documented for maximum insurance reimbursement." Alex looked relieved. "That sounds exactly like what I did at Cedars-Sinai. What's the pay structure?" Marcus had researched this carefully. Alex's previous job had paid $52,000 annually. The desperation of unemployment would make him grateful for anything above that threshold. $75,000 annually plus performance bonuses. The work is project-based, often requires evening and weekend hours, and absolute confidentiality is essential. Confidentiality? Our clients are high-profile individuals who value their privacy. Politicians, celebrities, business executives. Any breach of patient confidentiality would destroy their trust in our business. Alex nodded enthusiastically. "When can I start?" "Immediately. David will provide you with our first project. Documentation for a series of complex aortic reconstructions performed over the past 6 months." What Alex Rodriguez didn't know was that he'd just agreed to help Dr. Marcus Lang process fake insurance claims for surgeries that existed only in meticulously crafted false medical records. Pacific Vascular Institute, Operating Room 1, 6 months later. "This is the most beautiful surgical technique I've ever witnessed," whispered Dr. Sarah Chen, assisting Dr. Lang with a complex cardiac valve replacement on Margaret Thompson, a 67-year-old philanthropist whose damaged heart required complete reconstruction. Dr. Lang's hands moved with supernatural precision, rebuilding delicate cardiac structures while explaining his technique to the surgical team. Mrs. Thompson's mitral valve was completely destroyed by rheumatic fever. "We're not just replacing it, we're redesigning her entire cardiac output system to function more efficiently than it did in her youth." The surgery took 7 hours. When it was finished, Margaret Thompson had received one of the most sophisticated cardiac procedures ever performed on the West Coast. She had also unknowingly starred in 4 separate insurance claims, totaling $847,000. Dr. Chen, Dr. Lang said as they completed the final sutures, "Make sure Mrs. Thompson's recovery is documented in detail. I want comprehensive notes on every aspect of her post-operative progress." "Of course, Dr. Lang. Should I also prepare the insurance documentation?" "I'll handle that personally." Mrs. Thompson's procedure was so innovative that standard billing codes don't adequately reflect the complexity of what we accomplished. Dr. Chen nodded admiringly. Dr. Lang's dedication to ensuring proper documentation of his groundbreaking techniques was just another example of his professional excellence. What Dr. Chen didn't know was that Dr. Lang's personal handling of insurance documentation meant creating 3 additional fake patients who'd supposedly received identical procedures at 2 shell clinics that existed only on paper. Dr. Lang's private office, 2:17 a.m., 3 hours after completing surgery on Margaret Thompson. Dr. Lang sat in his office creating the masterpiece of medical fraud. Using sophisticated photo editing software, he modified Mrs. Thompson's preoperative scans to create medical records for 3 fictional patients, Maria Santos, David Kim, and Jennifer Walsh, names he'd borrowed from his own staff to make them seem more authentic. Each fake patient received a complete medical history, fabricated consent forms, and detailed surgical notes describing procedures identical to Mrs. Thompson's actual surgery. The documentation was flawless, indistinguishable from legitimate medical records to anyone who wasn't specifically looking for fraud. Maria Santos, age 64, chronic mitral valve stenosis secondary to rheumatic heart disease, was Dr. Lang typed into the medical record system. Underwent complete mitral valve replacement with cardiac output optimization at Pacific Cardiac Center. Pacific Cardiac Center was one of two fake outpatient clinics that Dr. Lang had established using shell companies and rented address space. The clinic consisted of a single office in a Burbank medical building, staffed by Alex Rodriguez, who processed insurance paperwork for what he believed was a legitimate consulting operation. The second shell clinic, Advanced Vascular Solutions, operated out of a similar setup in Pasadena, managed by David Chen, who'd been recruited through the same deceptive methods as Alex. Neither man knew that the medical records they processed described procedures that had never been performed on patients who didn't exist. Dr. Lang's phone buzzed with a call from David Chen. Dr. Lang, I finished processing the documentation for this week's procedures. The insurance submissions are ready for your review. Excellent, David. Any questions about the cases? Just one. Some of these procedures seem remarkably similar. Are we working with a surgeon who specializes in a very specific type of cardiac reconstruction? Dr. Lang smiled. David's observation was dangerously perceptive, but also easily explained. Exactly right, David. Our primary client has developed revolutionary techniques for complex aortic reconstruction. He's essentially created a new surgical subspecialty, which is why the procedures appear similar to someone unfamiliar with the innovations. That makes sense. The documentation is incredibly detailed. Whoever this surgeon is, he's meticulous about patient care. He's the best in the country. That's why our consulting work is so valuable to the medical community. After hanging up, Dr. Lang returned to his fraud masterpiece. By morning, Margaret Thompson's single surgery would generate 4 separate insurance claims from 3 different clinics, totaling $847,000 in fraudulent billing. And because Dr. Lang was genuinely one of the most skilled cardiac surgeons in America, the real surgery was so innovative and successful that no insurance investigator would question the legitimacy of similar procedures being performed by such a renowned surgeon. Dr. Marcus Lang had discovered the perfect crime, stealing millions of dollars while simultaneously saving lives and building an impeccable professional reputation. The Digital Patient Factory. 3 months later, Dr. Lang's home office. Dr. Lang's Malibu mansion contained a sophisticated computer setup that would have impressed cybersecurity experts. Multiple encrypted servers housed terabytes of medical records, patient databases, and financial tracking software that monitored every aspect of his $27 million fraud operation. Jennifer, I need you to research something else for me, Dr. Lang said during a video call with his practice manager, who had no idea that her boss was simultaneously managing the largest solo medical fraud scheme in California history. What kind of research, Dr. Lang? Patient database security at nursing homes and extended care facilities, specifically how long they retain medical records for deceased patients. Jennifer looked puzzled. Are you working on a research project about long-term care outcomes? Something like that. I'm particularly interested in facilities that might have experienced data breaches or security compromises in recent years. What Jennifer didn't know was that Dr. Lang had identified nursing homes with compromised patient databases as gold mines for creating authentic-looking fake patient identities. Deceased patients with legitimate medical histories could be resurrected digitally and used to generate fraudulent insurance claims. Dr. Lang, I found several facilities that reported data security incidents to the state health department. Sunset Manor had a major breach last year that exposed records for over 3,000 patients dating back 15 years. Perfect. Can you get me a contact at Sunset Manor? I'd like to discuss a potential consulting arrangement. 2 weeks later, Dr. Lang met with Sandra Martinez, Sunset Manor's overwhelmed IT administrator, who was still dealing with the aftermath of their data breach. Miss Martinez, I understand you're dealing with some challenging data recovery issues, Dr. Lang said, projecting the same confident expertise he used with patients. I represent a medical consulting firm that specializes in database reconstruction and patient record optimization. Dr. Lang, we're desperate for help. The breach corrupted thousands of patient files, and we're required by law to maintain medical records for deceased patients for 7 years minimum. I think we can help. My consulting team has experience reconstructing damaged medical databases. We could potentially recover and organize your patient records while ensuring complete HIPAA compliance. Sandra looked hopeful for the first time in months. What would that cost? For a facility your size, probably around $50,000. But I'd be willing to do the work for free in exchange for temporary access to your patient database for medical research purposes. What kind of medical research? Dr. Lang had prepared for this question. Longitudinal studies on cardiac outcomes in elderly patients. My research team needs access to historical patient data to validate new surgical techniques. Sandra practically wept with relief. Dr. Lang, if you can fix our database problems for free, you can have whatever research access you need. Dr. Lang had just acquired legitimate medical records for 3,000 deceased patients whose identities he could use to generate millions of dollars in fraudulent insurance claims. Dr. Lang's Malibu mansion. 1 year later, the housewarming party for Dr. Marcus Lang's $12 million Malibu estate was the social event of the Los Angeles medical community. The oceanfront mansion featured 7 bedrooms, a private surgical suite for emergency situations, and an art gallery that Dr. Lang claimed was for charity, but actually housed his personal collection of stolen masterpieces purchased with insurance fraud proceeds. Marcus, this place is incredible, said Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, chief of cardiology at UCLA Medical Center, admiring the panoramic ocean views from the main terrace. How does a private practice surgeon afford a place like this? Dr. Lang smiled his trademark confident smile, while internally calculating that his monthly mortgage payment was funded by approximately 15 fake insurance claims. The Pacific Vascular Institute has been incredibly successful, Elizabeth. When you're saving lives with innovative procedures, the financial rewards follow naturally. Still, $12 million is a lot of money for any surgeon. True, but I've also been fortunate with investments. Cryptocurrency, tech startups, art acquisition. Medicine pays well, but smart investing pays better. What Dr. Morrison didn't know was that every investment Dr. Lang mentioned was actually a money laundering operation designed to convert insurance fraud proceeds into legitimate assets. The cryptocurrency portfolio, digital wallets funded by Shell Clinic profits, the tech startup investments, fake companies Dr. Lang had created to justify large financial transfers. The art collection, paintings purchased through auction houses that didn't ask questions about the source of funds. Dr. Lang called Amanda Foster, the entertainment attorney whose life he'd saved 3 years earlier. I have to ask about this amazing art collection. That Monet is breathtaking. Thank you, Amanda. I believe that beauty and healing are connected. When patients see beauty, they heal faster. Amanda nodded approvingly. It's wonderful that you're using your success to support the arts. I heard you donated $500,000 to the Los Angeles Museum of Art last month. Dr. Lang had indeed made the donation, but the money had come from billing Amanda's own surgery to insurance companies under 4 different patient names. He was literally using her stolen insurance money to fund his public philanthropy. Giving back to the community is essential, Dr. Lang said. Success means nothing if you don't use it to help others. The irony was lost on everyone at the party, including Dr. Lang himself, who'd become so immersed in his false identity that he genuinely believed his own lies about success and generosity. Social media hubris. Dr. Lang's Instagram account, at Dr. Marcus Lang MD, Dr. Lang's social media presence had become legendary among medical professionals and aspiring surgeons. His Instagram account featured glamorous photos of exotic vacations, luxury dining experiences, and exclusive events that showcased a lifestyle most doctors could only dream about. Post number 1, private jet interior with champagne glasses. Caption, flying to Monaco for the European Cardiac Surgery Conference. Sometimes the journey is as important as the destination. Surgeon life, chakish, innovation, knock excellence. Post number 2, $100,000 dinner receipt from a Michelin-starred restaurant. Caption, celebrating a successful week of life-saving surgeries with my amazing surgical team. When you save lives, you celebrate life. Chukka, gratitude, chukkin, teamwork, chukkin, living fully. Post number Vintage Lamborghini in his garage. Caption, new addition to the collection. 1967 Miura, P400. Some people collect stamps. I collect machines that represent human engineering excellence. Just like surgery. Geschirrte classic cars, engineering excellence, short passion. The post generated thousands of likes and hundreds of admiring comments from medical students, fellow surgeons, and patients who saw Dr. Lang as the embodiment of medical success. But they also generated attention from people Dr. Lang never intended to reach. Comment from @insuranceauditor_LA. Beautiful lifestyle, doctor. Must be nice to afford such luxury on a surgeon's salary. #CuriousDoctor. Lang deleted the comment within minutes, but screenshot had already been taken by Linda Rodriguez, a senior insurance fraud investigator who'd been monitoring social media accounts of high-billing medical providers. Linda's job was to identify patterns that might indicate fraudulent billing, and Dr. Marcus Lang's lifestyle was raising red flags that she couldn't ignore. Sarah, Linda said to her colleague, insurance fraud analyst Sarah Kim, take a look at this surgeon's social media presence and tell me what you think. Sarah scrolled through Dr. Lang's Instagram posts, her expression growing increasingly concerned. This guy is flaunting wealth that seems inconsistent with typical surgical practice income. Private jets, $100,000 dinners, $12 million mansions. And look at his billing patterns, Linda added, pulling up Dr. Lang's insurance claim history on her computer. He's submitting claims for rare vascular procedures at a rate that's statistically impossible. Sarah studied the data. These numbers don't make sense. According to this doctor, Lang is performing more rare cardiac reconstructions than the top 5 university hospitals combined. Either he's the most miraculous surgeon in human history, or he's committing massive insurance fraud. Linda began compiling a formal investigation request. Dr. Marcus Lang's social media hubris was about to trigger the federal investigation that would unravel his $27 million criminal empire. Because the one thing Dr. Lang hadn't anticipated was that flaunting stolen wealth on social media would eventually catch the attention of the very people whose money he'd been stealing. FBI Field Office, Los Angeles, 6:30 a.m. Special Agent Robert Chen, no relation to Dr. Lang's various fake patients named Chen had been investigating white-collar crime for 12 years, but he'd never seen a medical fraud case with the complexity and audacity of Dr. Marcus Lang's operation. The preliminary analysis is staggering, Agent Chen told the assembled task force, which included representatives from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the California Medical Board. We're looking at what appears to be a completely fabricated patient population, generating millions of dollars in fraudulent insurance claims. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, medical director for the FBI's Healthcare Fraud Unit, studied the evidence boards that line the conference room walls. Walk me through the scope of what we're seeing. Agent Chen pulled up a digital presentation that had taken his team 3 months to compile. Over the past 4 years, Dr. Marcus Lang has submitted insurance claims for 2,847 complex cardiovascular procedures. Our analysis indicates that approximately 2,200 of those procedures were never performed on real patients. How do we know they weren't performed? Several ways. First, metadata analysis of the medical records shows massive copy and paste operations. The same surgical notes, slightly modified, appear under hundreds of different patient names. Second, many of the addresses listed for patients correspond to vacant lots, demolished buildings, or commercial properties. Agent Sarah Martinez, the task force's digital forensics specialist, added her findings. We've also discovered that many of the patients are actually deceased individuals whose medical records were obtained from nursing home databases that experienced security breaches. Dr. Walsh leaned forward, her expression growing grimmer. What about the real surgeries? Is Dr. Lang actually saving lives while simultaneously committing fraud? That's what makes this case so unusual, Agent Chen replied. Dr. Lang appears to be a genuinely skilled surgeon who performs legitimate, life-saving operations. But each real surgery generates multiple fake insurance claims using recycled patient information. So he's simultaneously a medical hero and a criminal mastermind? Exactly, which is why the scheme went undetected for so long. Insurance investigators expect medical fraud to involve fake procedures by incompetent practitioners. They don't expect legitimate surgeons to use their real surgical skills as cover for massive billing fraud. Agent Martinez pulled up financial tracking software on her laptop. The money trail is equally sophisticated. Lang has been laundering proceeds through a network of shell companies, fake investment portfolios, and offshore accounts. He's converted approximately $19 million into legitimate assets that would be extremely difficult to recover. Dr. Walsh has studied the financial flowcharts. What triggered the investigation? Social media, Agent Chen admitted with a slight smile. Lang was posting photos of $100,000 dinners and private jet trips. Insurance fraud analysts noticed that his lifestyle seemed inconsistent with legitimate surgical practice income. He literally posted evidence of his crimes on Instagram. He posted evidence of the wealth generated by his crimes. The actual fraud was far too sophisticated to be detected through social media analysis alone. Agent Martinez was reviewing surveillance reports. We've been monitoring Lang's associates for 6 weeks. The interesting finding is that most of them appear to be unwitting accomplices. Meaning what? Alex Rodriguez and David Chen, who process paperwork for Lang's shell clinics, genuinely believe they're working for a legitimate medical consulting company. Jennifer Walsh, his practice manager, has no knowledge of the fraudulent billing. Even his surgical team seems unaware of the broader criminal operation. Dr. Walsh nodded grimly. Classic compartmentalization. Each person knows only their small part of the operation, so none of them can expose the full scope of the fraud. Agent Chen pulled up the final element of their investigation. The most damaging evidence comes from electronic health records systems. We've subpoenaed metadata from the hospital databases that Lang uses to document his procedures. What did you find? Automated copy and paste operations that couldn't have been performed by a human. Surgical notes that were created in minutes when legitimate documentation would take hours. File creation timestamps that show hundreds of patient records being generated simultaneously. Agent Martinez added, we also discovered that Lang has been using sophisticated photo editing software to modify medical scans, creating fake patient imaging that supports his fraudulent procedure claims. The room fell silent as the task force members contemplated the scope of Dr. Lang's criminal enterprise. Ladies and gentlemen, Agent Chen said finally, we're dealing with the most sophisticated medical fraud scheme in American history. Dr. Lang has stolen $27 million while simultaneously building a reputation as one of the country's most skilled surgeons. Dr. Walsh stood up and walked to the evidence boards. What's our next step? Coordinated raids on all Lang's properties and shell clinic locations. We need to seize his computers, financial records, and patient databases before he realizes we're investigating him. When do we move? Agent Chen checked his watch. Tomorrow morning, during a live surgery, when Lang will be too focused on his patient to destroy evidence. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. They would arrest Dr. Marcus Lang in the act of saving someone's life, moments after he'd committed his final act of medical fraud. The Digital Evidence FBI Digital Forensics Lab. Later that evening, Agent Sarah Martinez worked alone in the sterile environment of the FBI's Digital Forensics Laboratory, analyzing terabytes of data seized from Dr. Lang's personal computers during preliminary surveillance operations. What she discovered was a master class in digital deception. Jesus Christ, she whispered, staring at her computer screen. This guy built an entire fake medical universe. Dr. Lang's personal servers contain detailed medical records for over 2,000 fictional patients, each with complete medical histories, realistic family backgrounds, and even fake social media profiles to make them appear authentic to casual. Investigation. Patient number 1247, Maria Santos, age 54, divorced, 2 children, employed as a teacher in Pasadena. Medical history included childhood rheumatic fever, leading to mitral valve stenosis. Recent cardiac catheterization showed severe valve dysfunction, requiring complete reconstruction. The detail was breathtaking. Dr. Lang had created not just names and medical conditions, but entire human lives complete with employment records, your insurance information, and even fake family photographs generated using AI technology. Martinez, what are you finding? Agent Chen called from across the lab. This is beyond fraud, Sarah replied, her voice filled with a mixture of admiration and horror. This is the creation of an alternate reality. Lang didn't just fake medical records. He built a parallel universe of fictional patients with histories so detailed They could fool anyone who wasn't specifically looking for fraud. She clicked through more files, patient after patient, each with surgical outcomes that perfectly matched Dr. Lang's legitimate procedures, but were attributed to people who had never existed. "Look at this," Sarah said, pulling up a comparative analysis. "Here's Margaret Thompson's actual surgery from last year. Mitral valve replacement, 7 hours, complete cardiac reconstruction. And here are 4 different patients who supposedly received identical procedures on different dates." Agent Chen examined the files. The surgical notes are nearly word-for-word identical. Not nearly identical. They are identical, just with names changed. Lang performed one surgery and billed for it 4 times using fake patient identities. Sarah continued clicking through the evidence. The most sophisticated part is how he validated the fake identities. Each fictional patient has credit reports, utility bills, employment records, even traffic violations. If an insurance investigator tried to verify these people existed, they'd find a complete paper trail. How is that possible? Identity theft on a massive scale. Lang was stealing personal information from deceased patients, then using that information to create fake identities that appeared legitimate in databases. A dead person from 1987 becomes a living patient in 2023 with a complete medical history. Agent Chen studied the financial tracking software on Sarah's secondary monitor. What about the money laundering? That's equally sophisticated. Lang created 17 shell companies that appear to be legitimate medical consulting businesses. Each company has proper state registration, federal tax ID numbers, even fake employee records. Insurance payments went to these shell companies, which then paid Lang for consulting services. So the fraud money looks like legitimate business income? Exactly. And then he invested the consulting income in supposedly legitimate ventures: art collection, real estate, cryptocurrency portfolios. By the time the money reached his personal accounts, it had been laundered through enough legitimate-looking transactions that it would be nearly impossible to trace back to the original fraud. Sarah pulled up Dr. Lang's personal financial records. The scary part is how disciplined he was. Most fraudsters get greedy and start living obviously beyond their means. Lang was smarter. He gradually escalated his lifestyle over 4 years, making each upgrade seem like the natural result of a successful medical practice. Until the social media posts, Sarah agreed. That's what ultimately exposed him. You can't post photos of $100,000 dinners without someone asking where the money came from. Agent Chen was studying the patient creation software that Dr. Lang had developed. "Sarah, this isn't just medical fraud. This is identity theft, money laundering, and computer fraud on a massive scale. How many federal crimes are we looking at?" Sarah had been calculating the same thing. Wire fraud, mail fraud, healthcare fraud, identity theft, money laundering, computer fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. If we can prove he knew his accomplices were processing fake documents, we can add racketeering charges. What's the potential sentence? Life in prison, without parole. Agent Chen closed the laptop and looked around the forensics lab at the evidence of Dr. Lang's 4-year criminal enterprise. "Tomorrow morning, we arrest a man who's simultaneously one of the most skilled surgeons in America and one of the most sophisticated white-collar criminals we've ever encountered. The patients whose lives he saved will never forgive us," Sarah observed. "And the insurance companies he robbed will never forgive us if we don't stop him." Pacific Vascular Institute, 7:23 a.m. Doctor. Marcus Lang was midway through reconstructing Thomas Rodriguez's failing heart, the kind of miraculous work that made him famous. While he operated, FBI agents quietly swept his offices, seizing computers, financial records, and evidence of a $27 million fraud. Practice manager Jennifer Walsh protested as agents dismantled Lang's office. But when shown insurance records, 2,800 surgeries billed where only a fraction had been performed, she realized he'd created fake patients and claims while running his legitimate practice. Operating room, 10:47 a.m. Rodriguez's surgery ended in success. As Lang scrubbed out, Special Agent Robert Chen approached. "Dr. Lang, you're under arrest for healthcare fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering." Shock rippled through the hospital as the renowned surgeon was led away in cuffs, exposed as both a medical savior and a criminal mastermind. Media explosion that evening, CNN reported, "Miracle surgeon arrested in $27 million fraud." Patients like philanthropist Margaret Thompson, whose life Lang had saved, struggled to reconcile his dual identity. "He gave me life," she said tearfully, "and then used it to commit crimes?" Los Angeles County Jail Lang, still in scrubs, met attorney Patricia Walsh. The FBI had overwhelming evidence: fake patients, shell companies, stolen medical records. Prosecutors offered 25 years if he cooperated. Lang refused. "I saved lives. Let a jury decide who I really am, the surgeon or the criminal." 6 months later, the courtroom overflowed. Patients filled one side, prosecutors the other. Lang admitted both sides of himself: the surgeon who gave decades of life to the sick, and the fraud who stole millions under their names. "I cannot separate the two," he told Judge Patricia Morrison. "I used my skill to heal and my arrogance to steal. I believed the good balanced the bad. I was wrong." Judge Morrison acknowledged his skill, but emphasized his betrayal. "You saved lives while stealing millions. Good works do not erase massive fraud." She sentenced him to 28 years in federal prison, $27 million restitution, and a permanent medical ban. Her final words: "You will be remembered as both a pioneer and a felon. History will judge you by the totality of your choices."